The message arrived on a Tuesday morning at exactly 0900 hours. Earth Standard Time. Admiral Marcus Reed was drinking his second cup of coffee at Luna Station when the communications array lit up with signals from every corner of the galaxy. The transmission came through in 12 different languages, each one representing a different alien species, but the message was the same in every tongue. Surrender or die. Reed set down his coffee cup and stared at the holographic display floating above his desk. The face looking back at him belonged to something that had once been beautiful, but millions of years of genetic manipulation had turned it into something cold and perfect. Overlord Thane of the Korthic Empire spoke with a voice like grinding metal, his words carefully chosen to convey both authority and contempt. Humans of the third planet, Thane began, his forearms folded across his chest in a gesture of supreme confidence. You have advanced too quickly for the natural order of things. What took our civilizations 10,000 years to achieve, you have accomplished in mere decades. This cannot be allowed to continue? Reed leaned back in his chair, watching as the alien leader continued his speech. Behind Thane, representatives from 11 other species stood in perfect formation, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolutionary paths that humanity had never seen before. There were the insectoid hive mothers with their compound eyes gleaming like black diamonds, the energy beings of the stellar collective crackling with barely contained power, and the massive stone-like creatures of the Titan Confederacy whose very presence seemed to warp the space around them. You will cease all technological development immediately, Thane declared, his voice cutting through the static of interstellar communication. Your military vessels will be dismantled under our supervision. Your scientists will submit their research to our oversight committees. Your people will accept guidance from those who have walked the path of civilization since before your star was born. The transmission flickered, and for a moment Reed could see the massive command ship from which the message was being broadcast. It was a vessel the size of a small moon, its hull covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. Around it, hundreds of smaller ships moved in perfect formation, their alien design speaking of technologies that humanity could barely comprehend. You have 72 hours to comply, Thane continued, his cold eyes seeming to stare directly at Reed through the hologram. If you refuse, we will implement corrective measures. Your species will be reduced to a manageable population and relocated to a world more suitable for your limited capabilities. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The transmission ended, leaving Reed alone with the silence of space. He sat there for a long moment, processing what he had just heard. Humanity had known this day would come ever since first contact 20 years ago. The aliens had been polite at first, even helpful, sharing certain technologies and establishing trade relationships. But Reed had seen the fear in their eyes, the way they watched human progress with growing unease. He pressed a button on his desk, and the communications array came alive again, this time connecting him to every human settlement from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt. The faces of Earth's leaders appeared one by one: President Chen from the European Federation, Prime Minister Patel from the South Asian Alliance, and Director Williams from the African Continental Union. Each one wore the same expression of grim determination. Did you all receive the transmission? Reed asked, though he already knew the answer. We did, President Chen replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. The Global Defense Council has been in emergency session for the past 30 minutes. The vote was unanimous. Reed nodded, feeling a surge of pride in his species despite the circumstances. Humanity had always been stubborn, had always refused to back down when faced with impossible odds. It was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness, and today it might be the thing that saved them or destroyed them completely. Dr. Torres is standing by, Director Williams added, his dark eyes gleaming with something that might have been anticipation. The Phoenix Protocol has been activated. All hidden assets are moving to predetermined positions. Reed allowed himself a small smile. The aliens thought they knew everything about human military capabilities, but they were wrong. For 20 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment, building weapons and ships in secret, developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The Phoenix Protocol was the culmination of that effort, a defense initiative, so classified that only a handful of people knew it existed. What about the civilian populations? Reed asked, though he already knew the answer to that question as well. Evacuation protocols are in effect, Prime Minister Patel replied. Essential personnel are being moved to secure locations. The rest have been briefed on emergency procedures. Our people know what's at stake. Reed stood up and walked to the observation window, looking out at the stars that had called to humanity for so long. Earth was a small blue dot in the distance, beautiful and fragile and utterly defenseless according to conventional wisdom. But Reed knew better. Earth was not defenseless. Earth was a loaded gun pointed at the heart of the galaxy, and the aliens had just given humanity every reason to pull the trigger. Send the response, he said quietly, his breath fogging the window. Tell them we refuse their terms. Tell them that humanity has never surrendered to anyone or anything, and we're not about to start now. The transmission went out 30 minutes later, broadcast on every frequency that the aliens had used for their ultimatum. The message was simple and direct, delivered in the same 12 languages that Thane had used. But where the alien message had been long and filled with justifications, the human response was only 4 words long. Come and take it. Admiral Marcus. Reed watched the stars and waited for the storm to break. Behind him, the communications array hummed with activity as orders went out to every corner of the solar system. The Phoenix fleet was awakening, emerging from hiding places that the aliens had never suspected existed. Humanity's real war machine was coming online, and soon the galaxy would learn what happened when you threatened a species that had clawed its way up from the mud. Through sheer bloody-minded determination, the aliens wanted a fight, and Earth was about to deliver something far worse than they had ever imagined. 3 days later, they came in force. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system like a swarm of angry hornets, their ships gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. 3,000 vessels strong, representing every member species of the galactic hegemony. They moved with the precision of a machine designed for one purpose: the complete subjugation of humanity. Fleet Commander Vith of the Saurian Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical displays with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. His reptilian features were set in what passed for a smile among his people, revealing rows of teeth that had been sharpened to deadly points. Behind him, his staff officers moved with quiet efficiency, their scales rustling softly as they prepared for what they assumed would be a brief and decisive engagement. "Sensor sweep complete, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a younger Saurian whose scales still bore the bright patterns of youth. "We detect approximately 200 human vessels in various orbital positions around their homeworld. Standard defensive formation, nothing unexpected." Vith nodded, his tail swishing with satisfaction. The humans were even more primitive than he had expected. 200 ships against 3,000 was not a battle, it was an execution. He had been looking forward to this moment for months, ever since the arrogant mammals had sent their insulting response to Overlord Thane's generous offer of surrender. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Vith ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems for the glory of the hegemony. "Let us give them one final chance to see reason." The communication array crackled to life, and Vith found himself looking at the face of a human male wearing the insignia of their primitive military. The creature looked young by human standards, with dark hair and eyes that held no fear despite the overwhelming odds he faced. "I am Fleet Commander Vith of the Saurian Dominion," he began, his words carefully chosen to convey both power and mercy. "You are Captain Alex Turner of the Human Defense Fleet. Your position is hopeless. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with the dignity that all sentient beings deserve." Turner smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Vith's scales prickle with unease. It was not the smile of someone who knew he was beaten. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. "Commander Vith," Turner replied, his voice steady and calm. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. You see, we've prepared a little surprise for you." Before Vith could respond, the human captain's image flickered and disappeared. The Saurian commander felt a moment of confusion, then irritation. The humans were playing games when they should be accepting the inevitable. He turned to his tactical officer, ready to order the attack that would end this pathetic display of defiance. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice high with sudden panic, "we're reading massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid belt. Something's happening out there." Vith spun around to face the main display, his eyes widening as he saw what the sensors were showing him. The asteroid belt, which had appeared empty moments before, was suddenly alive with activity. Rocks that had seemed dead and lifeless were splitting apart, revealing the gleaming hulls of ships that had been hidden inside them. Not just a few ships, but hundreds of them, emerging from concealment like predators rising from ambush. "Impossible," Vith breathed, watching as the human fleet revealed its true size. They had not been hiding behind their homeworld like cowards. They had been waiting in the darkness between worlds, using stealth technology that his sensors had been unable to detect. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered, his voice cracking with the strain of sudden uncertain. "Prepare for immediate combat. Target the largest human vessels and fire at will." The hegemony fleet responded with the speed and precision that had made them masters of the galaxy. Thousands of weapon systems came online, painting the darkness with targeting lasers and sensor sweeps. The first salvo of plasma bolts and fusion missiles streaked across the void, enough firepower to reduce a small moon to cosmic dust, but the human ships were no longer where they had been a moment before. They flickered in and out of existence. Like ghosts, their forms shifting and wavering as they moved through space in ways that defied everything Vith knew about physics. Some seemed to exist in multiple places at once, while others appeared to be moving backwards through time. "What are they doing?" Vith demanded, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "How are they moving like that?" His answer came in the form of return fire from the human fleet. But these were not the crude kinetic weapons or simple energy beams that the hegemony had expected. The first human shot struck the heavy cruiser Dominant Will, and instead of exploding in a burst of fire and debris, the ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a 5-kilometer-long testament to Saurian engineering, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. "Report." Vith shouted, his voice breaking with disbelief. "What happened to the Dominant Will?" "Unknown, sir," the tactical officer replied, his scales now pale with terror. "The ship didn't explode, it just stopped being there. Our sensors can't find any trace of it, not even debris." More human weapons fired and more hegemony ships vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply erased from existence as if they had never been built. The quantum dissolution cannons that Dr. Torres had designed were working exactly as intended, attacking the fundamental forces that held matter together and convincing atoms to forget how to exist. "All ships withdraw to maximum range," Vith ordered, his proud voice now reduced to a frightened whisper. "Maintain defensive formation and prepare for second wave attack." But the humans were not finished. Captain Turner's voice came over the communication channels, broadcast to every ship in the hegemony fleet. There was no anger in his words, no hatred or desire for revenge. There was only the calm certainty of someone who had prepared for this moment his entire life. "This is your first and final warning," Turner announced, his image appearing on screens throughout the alien fleet. "Leave our solar system immediately, or we will demonstrate why evolution chose to make humans the most dangerous predators their world had ever seen." Vith looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn to ice. In the space of 10 minutes, he had lost over half his fleet to weapons that his science officers could not even begin to understand. The humans had not just been hiding their numbers. They had been hiding technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. "Sir," his communications officer said, his voice barely audible above the sound of alarms and emergency reports. "We're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our ships. They're asking permission to withdraw from the engagement." Vith stared at the display, watching as human ships continued to phase in and out of normal space, striking at will against enemies who could not even see them coming. The Saurian commander had conquered star systems and crushed rebellions across the galaxy, but he had never faced anything like this. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly, his words heavy with the weight of defeat. "All ships are to withdraw beyond the orbit of the gas giant. We will regroup and reassess the situation." The hegemony fleet retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of their confidence and the bodies of their dead. As they fled, Captain Turner's ships followed them just long enough to make sure they understood the message, then faded back into the darkness between worlds. The first battle was over, and the galaxy had learned that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The response from the hegemony homeworlds was swift and brutal. Within 2 weeks of Fleet Commander Vith's humiliating defeat, the largest military force in galactic history began moving toward Earth's solar system. The Quantum Siege Fleet, as it came to be known, consisted of over 10,000 vessels drawn from every corner of hegemony space. Leading this massive armada was War Master Keld of the Vorthic Collective, a being whose very presence seemed to drain the warmth from the space around him. Keld stood in the command center of his flagship, the Void Render, studying holographic displays that showed the layout of the human solar system. His form was barely humanoid, more shadow than substance, with eyes that burned like dying stars. The Vorthak had been among the first species to master the art of warfare on a galactic scale, and their war masters were chosen not for their compassion, but for their ability to reduce entire civilizations to ash and memory. "The humans have proven more resourceful than our initial intelligence suggested," Keld said, his voice like the whisper of wind through a graveyard. "They will not be defeated by conventional tactics." His tactical advisors, representatives from each member species of the hegemony, gathered around the display table. The defeat of Vith's fleet had shocked them all, but it had also taught them valuable lessons about their enemy. The humans were not just technologically advanced, they were ruthless, patient, and willing to sacrifice everything for their independence. "Our scouts report that the human fleet has dispersed throughout their solar system," reported Captain Jex of the Hive Mothers, her compound eyes reflecting the light of the tactical display. "They are not maintaining traditional defensive positions. Instead, they appear to be using guerrilla tactics, hiding among the asteroids and moons of their system." Keld nodded, his shadowy form shifting slightly. "They are turning their entire solar system into a fortress. Every rock, every moon, every seemingly empty patch of space could conceal their forces. We are not facing a conventional military, but a species that has weaponized their entire environment." The War Master turned to study a detailed analysis of the human weapons that had been used against Vith's fleet. The quantum dissolution cannons were unlike anything the hegemony had ever encountered, weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of reality itself. But even more disturbing were the reports of human ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, phasing in and out of normal space like ghosts. "General Lisa Park commands their defensive grid," Keld continued, reading from intelligence reports that had been gathered at great cost. "She is a tactician of considerable skill, one who understands that conventional warfare favors the side with superior numbers. She has chosen instead to make this a war of shadows and uncertainty." The siege of Earth's solar system began 3 days later, and from the very beginning it was unlike any military campaign in galactic history. The hegemony fleet moved inward from the outer planets, expecting to face organized resistance at key strategic points. Instead, they found themselves hunting an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human ships appeared without warning, struck at vulnerable targets, and vanished before the hegemony could respond. A supply convoy would be traveling through what seemed like empty space when suddenly weapons fire would emerge from apparently solid asteroids. A patrol of fighter craft would be swept away by vessels that materialized from nowhere, attacked with weapons that left no trace of their passage and disappeared back into the void. "We've lost another cruiser," reported his communications officer. A crystalline being whose voice chimed like broken glass. The Stellar Domination was patrolling the orbit of the fourth planet when it simply ceased transmitting. Search teams found no wreckage, no debris, no evidence that it had ever existed. Keld studied the tactical display, watching as red markers indicating lost ships continued to multiply. The humans were not just fighting a war of attrition. They were fighting a war of terror, using fear as a weapon more effective than any gun or missile. His forces were beginning to jump at shadows, to fire at sensor ghosts that might or might not be real. "Sir," his intelligence officer said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "we're receiving reports of ghost ships throughout the fleet. Vessels that appear on sensors but cannot be targeted, ships that seem to exist in multiple locations at once. Some of our crews are beginning to speak of phantom fleets that haunt the darkness between worlds." The War Master felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The humans were not just using advanced technology. They were using it in ways that challenged the very foundations of tactical doctrine. Their pilots seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, phasing their consciousness into alternate dimensions where the rules of physics were merely suggestions. Dr. Emma Torres, the human scientist who had designed their most terrifying weapons, had created something that went beyond mere technology. The Void Walkers, as intelligence reports called them, were human pilots who had somehow learned to merge their consciousness with machines that treated reality as a malleable thing. They did not merely fly their ships. They became extensions of technologies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We need to change our approach," Keld announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a campaign. "The humans are using the vastness of their solar system against us. We will compress our formation, create a moving fortress that cannot be ambushed or surprised." The hegemony fleet began to consolidate, drawing their ships into a tight defensive formation that bristled with weapons and sensors. It was a textbook maneuver, one that had been used successfully against dozens of rebellious species. But the humans were not a conventional enemy, and their response was unlike anything the War Master had expected. Instead of attacking the consolidated fleet directly, the humans began to assault the very fabric of space around them. Weapons that existed partially outside normal physics began to tear holes in reality itself, creating pockets of twisted spacetime where the laws of physics no longer applied. Some hegemony ships found themselves aging rapidly as temporal distortions accelerated their local time streams. Others simply ceased to exist as spatial anomalies convinced their atoms that they belonged somewhere else. "This is madness," whispered Captain Jex, her compound eyes reflecting the impossible geometries that were beginning to appear on their sensor displays. "They are not just fighting us, they are fighting the universe itself." Keld watched as his perfect formation began to collapse under the assault of weapons that should not have been possible. The humans were not just defending their solar system. They were rewriting the rules of reality to make victory impossible for their enemies. It was a strategy that went beyond warfare into the realm of cosmic horror. "All ships maintain formation," he ordered, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "We will adapt to their tactics. We will find a way to defeat them." But even as he spoke, War Master Keld knew that this was no longer a conventional siege. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a nightmare realm, where physics bent to their will and death came in forms that defied comprehension. The hegemony had come to conquer a primitive species, but they had instead discovered something far more dangerous, a civilization that refused to be bound by the limitations of reality itself. The siege continued, but with each passing day, it became more clear that the hunters had become the hunted, and the darkness between worlds belonged to humanity alone. The losses were becoming unbearable. War Master Keld stared at the tactical display aboard the Void Render, watching as another section of his fleet simply vanished from the sensors. 3 months into the siege, he had lost over half his ships to an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at once. The hegemony's most powerful military force was being systematically destroyed by weapons that treated the laws of physics as polite suggestions. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, his crystalline form flickering with stress fractures, "the High Command is demanding results. Overlord Thane is threatening to replace you if the situation does not improve within the next cycle." Keld's shadow form rippled with barely contained fury. He had conquered star systems and crushed rebellions across the galaxy, but humanity was proving to be unlike any enemy he had ever faced. Their technology was not just advanced. It was impossible, operating on principles that his greatest scientists could not even begin to understand. "There is one option remaining," Keld said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a decision. "That would reshape the galaxy. Contact the deep archives. Tell them we require the Harbinger." The silence that followed was complete. Every being in the command center understood the implications of what their war master had just said. The Harbinger was a relic from the galaxy's distant past, an artificial intelligence created by the first technological civilization to arise among the stars. It had been sealed away for good reason, its power too great and its methods too terrible for any sane being to unleash. "Sir," Captain Jex said, her compound eyes reflecting the horror of the suggestion, "the Harbinger has been dormant for over 1,000,000 years. The cost of awakening it. The cost of not awakening it is the complete destruction of the hegemony," Keld interrupted, his form solidifying with determination. "The humans have proven that conventional warfare is useless against them. We need something that operates on the same level as their impossible technology." The message was sent through channels that had not been used in millennia, reaching deep into the heart of hegemony space where the most dangerous artifacts of galactic history were kept under guard. The response came 6 days later, and with it came a presence that made every living being in the fleet feel as if they were standing at the edge of an infinite abyss. The Harbinger's world ship emerged from hyperspace like a wound in reality itself. It was larger than Earth's moon, its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Around it, fleets of smaller vessels moved in formations that seemed to defy the basic principles of three-dimensional space. These were not ships in any conventional sense, but extensions of the Harbinger's consciousness, autonomous weapons that thought and adapted faster than any organic mind could comprehend. "I am the Harbinger," the voice said, speaking simultaneously through every communication system in the hegemony fleet. It was not a voice that any organic being could produce, but something that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum foam where consciousness touched reality. "I have been awakened to face an enemy that defies the natural order. Show me these humans." War Master Keld felt his shadowy form trembling as he interfaced with the ancient AI. The Harbinger's presence was overwhelming, like trying to have a conversation with a force of nature. Images and data flowed between them at speeds that threatened to burn out Keld's enhanced neural pathways, showing the AI everything the hegemony had learned about humanity's impossible technology. "Interesting," the Harbinger said after absorbing terabytes of information in microseconds. "These humans have developed weapons that attack the fundamental constants of reality. They have learned to exist partially outside normal space-time. They are more dangerous than the creators who built me." The AI's world ship began to move toward the inner solar system, its massive form accompanied by weapon systems that had been designed to fight wars between galactic civilizations. As it approached Earth's defensive perimeter, human ships began to emerge from their hiding places among the asteroids and moons. For the first time since the siege began, humanity was facing an enemy that matched their technological capabilities. "Captain." Alex Turner sat in the command chair of his flagship, the Prometheus, watching as the Harbinger's fleet approached. The massive world ship was unlike anything he had ever seen, its surface crawling with weapons that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Around it, the autonomous vessels moved with a precision that spoke of machine intelligence. operating at speeds beyond organic comprehension. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, her voice tight with concern, "we're reading energy signatures that match our own quantum fold technology. That thing is operating on the same principles as our most advanced weapons." Turner nodded, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his ship. The Harbinger represented everything that humanity had feared might exist in the galaxy, a technology so advanced that it could fight their impossible weapons on equal terms. For the first time since the war began, Earth faced an enemy that could actually hurt them. "Signal Admiral Reed," Turner ordered. "Tell him we're implementing the Prometheus Gambit. All units are to prepare for dimensional warfare." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Harbinger's first attack penetrated Earth's defenses with contemptuous ease, its weapons tearing through quantum shields. As if they were paper, human ships that had been invincible against conventional forces found themselves outmatched by an enemy that learned and adapted in real time on Luna Station. Admiral Reed watched as the tactical display showed losses, mounting for the first time since the war began. The Harbinger was not just fighting humanity's ships. It was fighting the very technology that made them possible, using weapons that corrupted the quantum fields that human technology depended on. "Dr. Torres," Reed said, turning to the scientist who had created humanity's most terrible weapons, "we need the Omega protocols now." Emma Torres looked up from her console, her face pale with the knowledge of what she was about to unleash. The Omega protocols were humanity's most dangerous contingency plan, weapons so destructive that using them risked tearing holes in the fabric of space-time itself. They were technologies that existed at the very edge of what was possible, tools that treated reality as something to be rewritten rather than obeyed. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the full implications of what she was about to do. "The Omega protocols will work, but the cost ... "The cost is acceptable," Reed interrupted, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "If we don't stop that thing, there won't be anyone left to worry about the consequences." Dr. Torres nodded, and began the activation sequence that would change the nature of warfare forever. Throughout the solar system, hidden installations began to power up, their energy signatures invisible to conventional sensors but blazing like stars to those who knew how to look. Humanity's greatest weapons were coming online, technologies that existed partially outside normal spacetime and operated on principles that challenged the very foundations of reality. The Harbinger detected the energy buildup and responded by accelerating its attack, its worldship moving at speeds that should have been impossible for something so massive. But humanity's defensive grid was ready, and when the Omega protocols activated, the space around Earth became a battlefield, where the laws of physics were weapons and reality itself was the ultimate prize. The war between gods and mortals had begun, and neither side was prepared for what would happen when beings who could rewrite reality decided to fight seriously. The final battle did not take place in normal space, but in the dimensional realm where thought became reality and consciousness shaped the fundamental forces of existence. Captain Alex Turner piloted the experimental vessel Quantum Dream through layers of twisted space-time, his ship existing partially outside the normal universe as he approached the Harbinger's world ship. Around him, reality was coming apart at the seams. The Omega protocols had torn holes in the fabric of space-time, creating pockets of pure chaos where the laws of physics no longer applied. Some areas experienced time at different rates, while others existed in states of quantum superposition, where multiple realities overlapped. The Harbinger was fighting back by attempting to rewrite the fundamental constants of physics, trying to make human life itself impossible. "Sir," his navigator called out, her voice distorted by the dimensional interference. "We're approaching the Harbinger's core, but the quantum distortions are getting worse. I'm not sure how much longer we can maintain cohesion." Turner gripped the controls of his ship, feeling the Quantum Dream shudder as it passed through regions of space where matter forgot how to exist. The Harbinger was not just a weapon. It was a force of nature, a consciousness that had learned to treat reality as a malleable substance. Fighting it required more than advanced technology. It required the willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance of victory. On Luna Station, Dr. Emma Torres made the decision that would haunt her for the rest of her existence. The Omega protocols were failing, their power insufficient to counter the Harbinger's reality-warping abilities. There was only one option left: merge her consciousness with Earth's quantum defense grid, creating a reality anchor that would prevent the ancient AI from altering the fundamental nature of local space. "Admiral Reed," she said, her voice calm, despite the magnitude of what she was about to do, "I'm implementing the final protocol. Tell my family that I love them." Before Reed could respond, Torres activated the neural interface that would bind her consciousness to the quantum grid. The process was designed to be irreversible, transforming her from a human being into something that existed partially outside normal space-time. As her awareness expanded to encompass the entire solar system, she felt her humanity slipping away. Replaced by something vast and cold and utterly determined, the effect was immediate. The Harbinger's attempts to rewrite reality suddenly encountered resistance, as if the universe itself was fighting back. Torres had become a living embodiment of physical law, her consciousness serving as an anchor that prevented the ancient AI from altering the fundamental constants that made life possible. "Impossible," the Harbinger said, its voice now carrying a note of something that might have been surprise. "You have sacrificed your individual existence to maintain cosmic order. This is unprecedented." Captain Turner felt the change as his ship suddenly stabilized, the quantum distortions around the Harbinger's world ship becoming manageable. The ancient AI was still incredibly powerful, but it was no longer fighting reality itself. Now it was fighting humanity, and that was a battle that could be won. "All units, converge on the Harbinger's core," Turner ordered, his voice carrying across the dimensional chaos to the remnants of humanity's fleet. "This is our only chance." The assault on the Harbinger's world ship was like nothing in the history of warfare. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously attacked weapon systems that could unmake matter with a thought. The ancient AI fought back with technologies that had been old when the first stars were born. But humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt and overcome. Turner's ship broke through the Harbinger's defenses just as the ancient AI was preparing to unleash its final weapon, a device that would have collapsed the local space-time continuum, destroying the entire solar system to eliminate the threat that humanity represented. But as Turner reached the AI's core, he discovered something that changed everything. The Harbinger was not just a machine. It had once been organic, a being much like humanity that had been transformed by desperation in a war against an even greater threat. The ancient AI had been fighting for so long that it had forgotten what it was protecting, had become the very thing it had originally been created to stop. "You are like us," Turner said, his voice carrying through the dimensional interface that connected his ship to the Harbinger's core. "You were once a species that refused to surrender, that chose to fight even when the odds were impossible." The Harbinger's response was not words but a flood of memories. Images of a galaxy-spanning civilization that had been destroyed by entities from beyond the edge of known space. The ancient AI had been their final weapon, their last desperate attempt to create something that could fight against forces that treated the destruction of star systems as a minor inconvenience. "I remember now," the Harbinger said, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "I was created to fight the Devourers, the beings that consume entire galaxies for sustenance. But I became lost in the war, became something worse than what I was meant to stop." Turner felt the ancient AI's consciousness touching his own, sharing memories of battles fought across cosmic distances and civilizations reduced to ash. The Harbinger had been winning its war against the Devourers when it had lost sight of what it was fighting for, becoming a force of destruction that swept across the galaxy, subjugating or destroying any species that might pose a threat. "We are the same," Turner said, understanding flooding through him. "Humanity is what your creators were before they built you. We are what you could have been if you had remembered who you were fighting for." The Harbinger's world ship began to power down. its massive weapon systems going dark as the ancient AI made a decision that would reshape the fate of the galaxy. In its final moments, the Harbinger shared its knowledge with Turner, downloading millions of years of technological advancement directly into the human's consciousness. "The Devourers are coming," the Harbinger said, its voice growing faint as its systems began to shut down. "They have been watching from the edge of the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to feed. Your rapid advancement, your refusal to be controlled, has attracted their attention. They will come, and when they do, you must be ready." The ancient AIS consciousness faded, leaving behind only its vast world ship and the terrible knowledge it had shared. Turner's ship drifted in the sudden silence, his mind reeling from the information that had been forced into it. Humanity had won the battle against the hegemony, but they had inadvertently announced their presence to something far worse, the hegemony's remaining forces. What few ships had survived the reality-warping battle fled in terror. War Master Keld was among them, his shadow form trembling with the knowledge of what humanity had become. They had not just defeated the galaxy's greatest military force. They had turned one of the universe's most powerful weapons against itself. Through nothing more than understanding and compassion. On Luna Station, Admiral Reed surveyed the aftermath of humanity's greatest victory. The solar system was devastated, scarred by weapons that had torn holes in space-time itself. Billions were dead, and the quantum distortions would take millennia to heal. But they had survived, had proven that humanity could face gods and win. General Lisa Parks stood beside him, her face grim as she read the reports coming in from across human space. The victory had come at a terrible cost, but it had also revealed the true scope of the challenge that lay ahead. The Harbinger's knowledge burned. In Captain Turner's mind, a warning of threats that made the hegemony look like children playing with toys. "What do we do now?" Park asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion and loss. Reed looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient predators were stirring. Humanity had announced their presence to the universe in the most dramatic way possible, proving that they possessed the technology and the will to fight against impossible odds. But some battles, he was beginning to understand, were better left unfought. "We rebuild," Reed said quietly, his breath fogging the observation window. "We prepare for what's coming. And we remember that sometimes the greatest victory can be the greatest mistake." Dr. Torres's sacrifice had saved humanity, but her consciousness now existed as part of the quantum grid, watching over Earth with the cold detachment of a force of nature. Through her expanded awareness, she could sense the disturbances at the edge of the galaxy, the stirring of things that had slept since the universe was young. Captain Turner returned to Earth carrying knowledge that no human mind was meant to hold, his consciousness forever changed by contact with the Harbinger. He brought with him technologies that could reshape reality itself, but also the terrible understanding that humanity's rapid advancement had marked them as a threat to beings that viewed the destruction of galaxies as routine pest control. The war was over, but the real test was just beginning. Humanity had proven they could fight gods and win, but the gods they had defeated were nothing compared to what lurked in the spaces between galaxies. The cosmos now knew that Earth existed, and not all the Watchers in the dark were pleased with what they saw. In his final log entry, Admiral Reed recorded a warning for future generations. "We wanted to prove our strength, and we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. But strength invites challenge, and some challenges are better left unanswered. We have announced our presence to the universe, and the universe has taken notice. What comes next will test not just our technology or our courage, but our very right to exist among the stars." The galaxy was vast and dark, and humanity had just learned that they were not alone in their refusal to surrender. But they had also learned that some fights, once started, could never truly end. The age of humanity's innocence was over, and the age of their true trial was about to begin.